how are you? Welcome back to my channel. So excited to be here today because we're going to be doing my April reading wrap-up. I participated in Old School April, which is a readathon, watchathon, activity-a-thon dedicated to nostalgia. It's hosted by Kelsey over at Slime and Slashers, and I mostly focused on 90s and 80s, mostly 90s. So all of my books were either set in the 90s or 80s, or they were published around that time, or some of these were earlier than that. I did watch some movies and things, but for this video we're only going to be focusing on books. I didn't know where to put this one in the stack since it's a reread, so I'll just tell you about it first. And that was my best friend's Exorcism. It's always going to be a favorite. It's 5-star. Abby and Gretchen have been best friends since grade school. Their friendship is something special. It's really the best part of this whole book. It's the reason I love this book so much, aside from the fact that it's set in the 80s and has all the 80s vibes. Their friendship is just amazing. After a night of skinny dipping, Gretchen begins to act strange. She's irritable, she's moody, she is acting so out of character. Everybody else basically gives up on her. All of her other friends give up on her, but not Abby. Abby's the one that stays by her side through everything, and she knows something's wrong. And she tries to tell everybody, and nobody listens to her through the whole thing. And, you know, of course, it's my best friend's Exorcism, so you know that she ends up being possessed. But this is all about their friendship. And the fact that Abby never gave up on Gretchen through the whole thing. And I just love it so much. I love this story. The ending's amazing. Everything about it is just 5-star material. It's just perfect. And it has all the quirks of a Grady Hendrix book. Now we'll start with my least favorite. Not that it was bad, but that is A Shocker on Shock Street, which is a Goosebumps. Aaron and Marty are best friends, and they love horror movies, especially Shocker on Shock Street movies. While Aaron's dad gives them the opportunity to actually go on set and explore, and, you know, creepy things happen. This was a 3-star. It was a lot of fun. It's been years and years and years since I read a Goosebumps, and I did remember after reading this that, you know, all the the cliffhangers at the end of the chapters and all the fake outs, that was a lot of fun. But yeah, it was still a good time. Next up, we have Fall into Darkness by Christopher Pike. We have Anne and Sharon. They and their friends go on a camping trip toward the edge of a cliff, and Sharon and Anne decide to go to the very edge of the cliff, and Anne ends up falling off. Well, their friends heard them arguing right before Anne falls off, and Sharon is on trial for Anne's murder. Of course, Sharon's saying she didn't do it. Everybody else thinks that she did because, of course, everybody heard them arguing. So the whole book is it's dual timeline. One timeline is going back to the cliff and what actually happened, and then the other timeline is in the courtroom and Sharon's lawyer trying to prove her innocence. So it was good fun, like a Christopher Pike book is. It was full of twists, it was wild, it was over the top, and just a good time. And then I read the Babysitter books 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 were pretty good. They were 4 stars. Of course, you have Jenny. Jenny is, of course, a babysitter. The first one, she's in this old Victorian house, and the house itself is really creepy and creaky. The dad in that one is very high-strung and super nervous and just kind of a hot mess. And, you know, the kid is fun. You know, the kid that she's babysitting is fine. But, yeah, the dad's really high-strung in the house, you know. But she starts getting these really creepy calls about, are you alone? Company's coming. You know, so that's super creepy, and things go awry from there. And then on the second one, she's babysitting again. She's dealing with PTSD. She finally gets the nerve to babysit a second time. And she starts getting these calls again. In this one of the parents is again kind of high-strung. But in this one, the kid is kind of, I don't want to call him creepy, but the kid is kind of a monster. And on top of that, she's getting these creepy calls again. I'm back. And yeah. And then the third one, she's not babysitting. She's spending the summer at her cousin Deborah's house. Her cousin takes on a babysitting job, and her cousin starts to receive these calls saying, I'm back, company's coming. And this one was a 3-star. They start to follow the same formula with the characters end up being kind of the same sort of, one of the parents is a mess or nervous or high-strung. All of her boyfriends are all whiny and needy and clingy, and they get all pouty when she tells them no or whatever. That's really obnoxious to me. I do not like that character trait. And it just starts to be very predictable, and the ending of this was kind of, I just wasn't really as impressed with this one. And with it being predictable and the same sort of cookie cutter, layout, I just wasn't as impressed. But it was still a good time. It was still fun, but it was more of a 3-star situation. Then we have Gnelfs by Sydney Williams. This was a really good time. I did have a lot of fun with this one. Heaven is this 4.5-year-old little girl, and she's been watching Gnelfs on TV, and they are her idol. She loves them so much. She has so much fun watching them on Saturdays. Well, on TV, they're these cute, cuddly little green creatures. In real life, they're not so cute and cuddly. In real life, they are mean, and they start tormenting Heaven and doing mean things to her, and just tormenting her in real life. So her mom, is going through a divorce and all these things, and at first her mom thinks, well, maybe this is a symptom of divorce. Maybe this is Heaven dealing with that, because her mom doesn't actually see these little creatures, so she doesn't know what exactly is going on. And things just kind of escalate, but yeah, they are just pure evil. And even though they're pure evil and you really don't want them to be tormenting cute little Heaven because she's just adorable, they're also really hilarious though. Their antics and some of the things they say are just hysterical, and you can't help but laugh out loud. But yeah, they're pure evil. Really fun. The only thing that I didn't like is it went into a direction that I really didn't care for, and it kind of took the focus away from the Gnelfs, and I just wanted a little bit more from them because they were the best part. They were really funny, and it kind of took the focus away from them, but it was still a really good time, and I really liked it. Next up, we have Horrorama, which was a short story collection. It has a set of 3 short stories. Now, none of these were really nostalgic, which is what I was expecting them to be, but they were still fun. The first one was definitely my favorite. It's called Store All Self-Storage. It's this guy, Richard. He sees this ad for a job at this storage facility, and he goes and applies, and he's pretty much hired immediately, and his only instructions are, call the police if anything happens. And he says, well, what if somebody gets locked out of their unit? And they're like, don't call us. If anything bad happens, just call the police. So, okay. Well, all these really weird things happen. And I won't tell you what, but it's all really bizarre. And it's one thing after another. It's all the time. Every night something bizarre happens. And that's all I can really say. But it's just fun. And he is kind of snarky and funny. So you have this touch of humor with it, and I really enjoyed that one a lot. And there were, of course, there were 2 other ones. One of them is this group of guys that go camping. It's called Primitive. It's this group of guys that go camping, and while they're out camping, this lady comes up to them, and she's pretty much naked. She's just wearing rags, that's it. And she clearly hasn't bathed. She's covered in mud. Her hair's all matted. And she goes up to them and says that she's looking for her son. And her story is so wild that they kind of don't believe her. But things, they go off the rails pretty quickly. That one was really gory and really gruesome, but it was really good too. The last one I didn't exactly care for as much. I feel like it needed a little bit more space. It needed more of a full novel. And that one is about a cult. They really, really want to revive their dark god, but they need a body to do so. And yeah, it was descriptive and imaginative, and it wasn't bad. It could have been better, though, with more space. There was a lot that really needed more. But yeah, overall, this was a 4-star. Next up, we have The New Girl by R.L. Stine, which is a Fear Street book. This guy, Corey, is infatuated with the new girl. She's gorgeous, and he is so infatuated that he starts missing practice. He's a gymnast. He starts missing practice and just kind of letting his team down and all of this, all for her. Well, turns out he finds out that she's dead, and he's trying to figure out what the deal is with that, and that's all I'll really say about it. But I miss reading Fear Street. It had been years since I read a Fear Street 2, and I really liked that. That whole awkward teen phase part of it, and trying to figure out, does she like me? Does she not like me? All that was really fun. And yeah, it was a good time. And also the whole, Saturday night renting movies, pizza, going over to a friend's house and all that. It definitely had the 90s vibes to it, which I really enjoyed. We have Master of Murder, Christopher Pike. This was another 4-star. Marvin is a famous author, and he's actually a millionaire. But no one in his high school has any idea. Actually, no one in his entire hometown or his entire life knows that, except for his little sister. And it's funny because in his real life, he's really awkward. He can't really get a date. No one has any idea that he has all this money and all this fame because he's written several books. And he'll be walking around his high school and he'll hear people talking about his book because he writes for high school kids. He writes YA books. And you'll hear them talking about his series and them guessing about what the next book is about or whatever. And he's also suffering from writer's block. So he keeps telling his editor that he's almost done with his latest book, but he hasn't even started because he's got writer's block. He starts getting these letters. And the first letter says, "I know who you are." Well, the letters start getting kind of threatening. And then he ends up actually wrapped up in this sort of mystery. And he kind of finds parallels between his writing and his real life. Like maybe what he's writing is actually true. And that's all I can really say about that. But I really liked this one. It was a really good time. I especially liked the relationship between him and his sister. It was really special. And she was really special. And just their whole dynamic was perfect. Next we have The Feeding by Lee Clark. This one is Robin and Matt have been having marital problems, and their counselor has suggested that they take a vacation. So they take their kids and they go to the mountains in California. And unfortunately, where they've gone, there is this evil thing lurking and wanting to feed off of children, basically. So, yeah, this one just pushes you right into it. Just throws you right in from the very beginning. It's creepy very early on, and it doesn't stop being creepy the entire time. It went places I didn't expect it to go. It got darker than I expected it to go. It is super creepy. The only thing that I had a complaint about was the dialogue was ridiculous, and I mentioned that in the vlog. But yeah, it was really good, and the dialogue didn't take away from the horror, because that's really what it's about. It was super creepy, and yeah, it took it way farther than I expected. It was really good. Definitely a 4-star. Would definitely recommend it. Next up, we have Mama by Ruby Jean Jensen. The main character of this is Dory. Dory is a 5-year-old little girl. Her dad passes away at the very beginning of this, so her mom's parents give them a house. They all move. She, her mom, and her siblings all moved into this house. It's the house that her mom grew up in. It's the house her mom's parents grew up in. Well, there are all these toys in the attic. And Dory wanders up into the attic, and she spends a lot of time up there. Her mom is distracted because grief, and also she meets this guy pretty much immediately named Corey. And, she doesn't immediately fall in love with Corey, but he's around a lot. And also Corey talks her mom into writing a novel. So she's distracted between the writing the novel, the grief, Corey. She's distracted with all these things. So while Dory's siblings are at school, her mom's writing the novel. Dory is spending all of these hours every day in the attic with all these creepy toys. And these toys start to come to life. Not just the doll, but multiple toys. The first part of the book is pretty subtle. It's a little creepy, but it's also more cozy, a little slower pace. The second half of the book, though, it makes up for that. It's a lot creepier. It's a lot darker. It's scary. It's really good. I enjoyed this one a lot. I had a lot of fun with it. I loved the relationship, especially between her and her brother. He was so nurturing with her and just so sweet with her, even though at first he really didn't believe her that the dolls were moving, because, it was so subtle, and she's 5. No one really believed her. But yeah, this was hella creepy. If you like a creepy doll book, you definitely need to read this one. It's really good. And I'm definitely going to be reading Annabelle at some point, because this was so good. Now I have to read Annabelle. Next up, we have Jurassic Park. This was so much better than the movie. I loved this. It does go in more to the science, and I've had people ask if the science is, overwhelming, or if it's intimidating. It's not. It's not too bad. The first 180 pages is more sciencey, and then it gets more into the dinosaurs and the action and all that. And even though the first little bit was more sciencey, it was still really fascinating, and it didn't bog it down too much. It was still really good, and you got more of the backstory of the park and how it all worked, and taking care of the dinosaurs and keeping them safe and all that stuff. But once the dinosaurs started happening, once the kills started happening, it was very fast, and it was action-packed. It was really good. And also, since there are so many different kinds of dinosaurs, they all have different ways to kill. So they're all unique. All the kills are unique. So it kept it interesting, and it kept it, it kept you on your toes. You didn't know what was going to happen next. Even if you've seen the movie, this was not like the movie. There were still plenty of surprises there, because it wasn't an exact copy of the movie at all. And another thing I mentioned before, anytime, if I'm ever in a life or death situation like this, where I'm being stalked by a predator, I hope that I don't have kids with me, because they will get you killed. They are hungry at the worst times. They have to go to the bathroom at the worst times. You know, they sneeze at the worst times. It's not a good situation. But this was really good. This was a 4-star. Next up, we have All That's What I Call Horror. It's a horror anthology. There were multiple authors here. I know I mentioned this before, but can we just talk about this cover? It's amazing. I loved this because every single one of these stories was nostalgic. It was perfection. There were so many references, not only to music and, you know, all the pop culture, but also events that happened in the 90s that we would all remember. There were toys, there was fashion, there was, you know, all the things. It was so good. My favorite story in this was one about creepy toys. But every single one of these stories were 4 and 5 stars, which is so rare for anthologies. I don't know that I've ever had an anthology where every single one was rated so high. There's usually at least 1 or 2 that bring the average down. That is not the case for this one. It was so good and definitely worth a read. This was a 4-star. So good. See how long I can stack this before it falls over. Next up, we have Dead 11 by Jimmy Giuliano. This one follows multiple different points of view and multiple different timelines. Willow lost her son, and like a couple years before, she had lost her son, and she has gone through a really hard time. Her and her husband had actually separated because, you know, the grief was too much, and due to their own separate issues because of that, they had separated. Well, Willow one night had a nightmare, and after the nightmare, she goes into her son's room, moves the toy box aside, and under the toy box says Clifford Island. There are words under the toy box that just say Clifford Island. So she starts researching, and she ends up going to this Clifford Island to see if there's any kind of link between that place and her son. So some of the chapters have letters from Willow to her husband while she's on the island. And then there are some chapters that are just Willow while she's on the island exploring. Then there are chapters where Harper, her brother, is on the island trying to figure out what happened because Willow has disappeared. Because she ended up disappearing while on the island. And then there are chapters following Lily, which is a girl who's in high school, and she's lived on the island her whole life, and she just really wants to get off the island. She cannot wait to get out of there. So, following different people, following different timelines. There are weird things happening on this island because they are all stuck in the year 1994. The chapters that are Willow's chapters, she quickly realizes that because she keeps seeing the O.J. Simpson car chase on all the TVs, and she notices that everybody's dressed very 90s, and, you know, she keeps seeing 90s, you know, she keeps hearing 90s music, and, you know, all these 90s references. The kids are playing Pogs, and she sees, you know, there's a Skip It and things like that. But anyways, it is very nostalgic. It has all the nostalgia in it. I loved that, and I was pretty much roped in from the very beginning. It's one of those, once you get into it, you have to keep reading because you have to know what's coming next. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. Also, there were multiple parts that gave me chills, and that's really rare. As much as I read horror, it's really hard to do that, but just the way it was written and the different things, yeah, I literally got chills. It was so good. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. We have one more 4-star before we get into 5 stars. It's going to surprise you this is so far because it's not in horror. But How to Build a Girl by Kayla Moran. This was so fun. Johanna is a 14-year-old girl, and she shames herself on local TV so badly that she decides to completely reinvent herself. She changes her name. She decides that she wants to be a music journalist. So she actually goes to the library for over a year, and actually almost 2 years, and just keeps getting these records and learning all about all this different music so that she can be a music journalist. She changes the way she dresses. She changes everything about herself, and completely reinvents herself. And by 16, she is a music journalist, and she ends up, another thing about her is she is what I would consider hypersexual. At 14, she's still a virgin, but she doesn't want to be. She is very antsy to grow up. So by 16, she is in the music biz, and she's around all these adults. And yeah, she ends up kind of on the wild side. She's very quirky, witty, very intelligent, very unique. And it's hard not to love her. I very much enjoyed getting to know her within these pages. And it was really fun. It was really fun seeing her find herself and going along on that journey as she figured out who she was. But yeah, she ends up in all these shenanigans. She ends up into drugs, alcohol, sex. She ends up as a sex adventure, is what she calls herself. And I just loved how honest and real it was. It's very vulnerable and somewhat relatable too, because it's just what everybody goes through. I mean, not all of this, but it's kind of what everybody goes through as far as that awkwardness of trying to figure out, who you are and what you want to be and all that. But she took it to the extreme because this thing that happened on live TV was so traumatizing for her. And later down the line, she realizes that, maybe it wasn't so bad looking back on it. But yeah, the lengths that she goes to completely reinvent herself was kind of impressive, especially at her age. And you just can't help but love her. You can't help it. And she's just so quick-witted. And the way this was written was, because it's her point of view, it's written very quickly. It's very fast-paced. And it's almost like getting a story from a very quick-witted, rambly 14-year-old girl, but not obnoxiously so. It was just a really fun read, and Johanna was a very fun character, and I just love her. And this is one that I would definitely read again, just because I love her so much. Now the last 3 are going to be my 5-star reads. We have The Monster Club by R. Chetwynd Hayes. I have to watch the movie for this because I loved this. Donald is a very sweet guy. He's one of those guys that would give to any charity or anybody that's suffering. He would give to them. And one day he sees this guy who has fainted, and he's skin and bones, and he's an odd looking dude, but he's obviously very hungry. And so Donald takes him into his flat and he offers him a meal. And the guy says, "I can't eat that." Well, the guy admits to him that he's a vampire. He can't eat food. He only eats blood because he's a vampire. So Donald is kind of calm about it for somebody that just found out he has a vampire in his flat. And he's like, okay. So they have this conversation, and the vampire ends up inviting Donald to this monster club, which is beneath the streets of London. Well, Donald's pretty brave. He ends up going. He's reluctant at first, but he ends up going. And while he's there, he meets all these interesting monsters. And they end up telling him their stories. And there are 5 stories altogether. It's kind of like a short story collection, because the stories don't all go together. But it'll go back and forth between a story, and then it'll go back to Donald where he's, interacting with these monsters. It was so fun. They were all so unique and fun, and they all have their different personalities, and they were dark, but then they also have that sense of humor. And I love a good horror story with that touch of humor. It was perfect. I loved everything about it. And anything that's 5 stars is definitely going to be something that I will reread. And I'm really curious how closely the movie is with the book, because I loved it so much, and all the monsters were so unique, and some that I hadn't ran into before, and the stories were pretty unique too. Next up, we have Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesar. This was a good time too. I'm going to read you what's on the synopsis because I don't want to give anything away on this one. I'm going to be careful with it. When Quinn and her father moved to a tiny town with a weird clown for a mascot, they're looking for a fresh start. But ever since the town's only factory shut down, Kettle Springs has been cracked in half. Most of the town believes that the kids are to blame. After all, the juniors and seniors at Kettle Springs High are the ones who threw the party where Arthur Hill's daughter died. They're the ones who set the abandoned factory on fire, and who spend all their time posting pranks on YouTube. They have no respect and no idea what it means to work hard. For the kids, it's the other way around, and now Kettle Springs is caught in a constant battle between old and new, tradition and progress. It's a fight that looks like it will destroy the town, until one homicidal clown with a pork pie hat and a red nose decides to end it for good. Because if your opponents all die, you win the debate by default. This was the perfect slasher. All the kills were unique. It had a high body count. The setting was perfect because you have this cornfield in the middle of nowhere. It's a small town. Oh, it was so good. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I can't give too much away. I love the main character, Quinn. Quinn and her dad had the perfect dynamic. And you know I love I'm all about characters mostly. But yeah, I loved their dynamic so much. And I loved Quinn a lot too. Just really good. I'm sorry I took so long to read this one. I was trying to wait until fall, but for whatever reason it called to me last week and I just had to pick it up, and I'm so glad that I did because it was really good. See if that stays. And then the last one I read was Elizabeth, and this was my favorite, I think, for the month by Ken Greenhall. Yeah, Elizabeth is a 14-year-old girl, but you wouldn't know that by reading this. She seems very advanced. She's very intelligent, but also very manipulative. She uses her sexuality against not only men, but women too. Yeah, the first chapter ends, I'll tell you. I first came to live with grandmother about a year ago, after I killed my parents. I don't mean to sound callous, let me explain. She doesn't seem to care about anything. She has that same tone no matter what is going on in this book. Her tone is always even, and she doesn't really believe in love or anything like that, but she just manipulates, and you know, you can't help but be fascinated with her. This is one of those books I could pick apart and just study this character because there are just layers and layers to her. Just absolutely mesmerized by her from the very first page. Now, the middle of it was definitely slower, but even still, I was intrigued. It's one of those books. So, after that incident, or actually before that incident even, she ends up talking to this lady Frances in the mirror. And Frances tells Elizabeth that she's going to help her learn her powers. Because apparently she tells Elizabeth that she's a witch. Like that Elizabeth is a witch. And she comes from a long line of witches apparently. And yeah, so Frances is going to teach her powers. I can't say too much without giving it away because it's a pretty short book. My copy is about 150 pages, so I can't say too much. But another thing that's important to note is that Elizabeth's lover is her dad's brother, which is really inappropriate. But It's not graphic. It doesn't go into detail about that. Yeah, but just know that if that's something that super bothers you, probably don't want to read it. But yeah, Elizabeth is very, yeah, she's on another level as far as manipulation goes. And it's very disturbing and unsettling and uncomfortable at times. But I think that's what makes a good horror novel. And that's what makes this so good, is because you do have that feeling throughout the whole book, is just unsettled. But it's really, really good. And that's about all I could say about it without giving anything away. Yeah, those are all the books that I read in April. Next week we will be, actually, yeah, next week I will have a book haul for you. Actually went to Half Price Books a few weeks ago. I'm just now getting it out there for you. But I found a whole bunch of vintage paperbacks. So look forward to that next week. I will see you next Friday. Bye for now.